From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is the Morning Edition. I'm Julia Carr-Katzel, filling in for Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Monday, June 30. Many of us most likely spent the weekend catching up with friends at our local pub or favourite restaurant. It's unlikely we turned our attention to those preparing our meals, hidden in the kitchen. Chefs who may be on their 14th hour, burnt out and very far from home. Some of those chefs, former staff at lavish Merivale venues across Sydney, are now sharing their story and the, at times, darker reality of their work. Today, good food reporter Bianca Hrovat and investigative reporter Eryk Bagshaw. And just a note, lawyers for Merivale have denied the allegations raised in this episode. You'll find their response at the end. Bianca and Eryk, welcome to the Morning Edition.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be with you, Julia.
Now, you've both been reporting on allegations of sexual harassment and exploitation in Australia's hospitality industry for the past year. Incidents that have allegedly taken place at Merivale venues or involving their staff. And your reporting has encouraged more to speak out. So I wanted to talk to you about that new community. And that story starts in Mexico. So can you take us there, Bianca?
Yeah, so I suppose our story starts in about 2017 when Merivale sought to fill a industry-wide skills shortage by going to Mexico with a Texas-based recruitment company called Alliance Abroad International. And basically what they did is they sent some of their chefs over there, like Dan Hong from Mr. Wong's, and recruited several dozen chefs from Mexico City through a series of, kitchen trials and information sessions, all of which painted Merivale to be this very glamorous company, in Australia that would help them have a better life here.
It's a really big problem, I guess, for hospitality companies in Australia in that there is a skills shortage and there's simply aren't enough Australians to do the jobs. In Merivale's case, they've got 5,000 employees, probably need more chefs than any other company in the country. And so clearly when you're that, desperate for more workers, you do some pretty out there things.
And from the chef side of things, what are they being sold? What are they being told about Australia and their life there?
Well, for many of the chefs we spoke to, they were from parts of Mexico where living conditions weren't great. They were from a lot of cartel-controlled areas where they were subject to a lot of violence. In some cases, it even affected their families personally. So for them, Australia and working for Merivale represented a better life, a safer life, a better life for their family. And that was, an opportunity they didn't want to pass up. But it also meant for some chefs that had really incredible fine dining backgrounds in restaurants in Mexico City, it meant for them an opportunity to advance their career on the global stage and come to Australia and work in these really modern kitchens that, had millions of dollars spent on them.
Okay, but when these chefs did arrive in Australia, life was quite different to the dream that they'd been sold, wasn't it, Eryk?
They certainly expected all the glamorous staff parties, Sydney Harbour, life at the beach, kangaroos, all of the different images of Australia that Merivale and Alliance Abroad really sold them about their future here. But the reality was very different. When they arrived, they would be put up in a hostel for a couple of nights, have to sleep in 10-bed dorms. Another chef slept in a 3x3 in a 2-bedroom apartment with 6 other Mexican migrant chefs and struggled. The hours, the conditions, the sense of discrimination, I think really started to hit home early on, leaving some of them questioning really whether they had done the right thing at all.
And part of that was this contract that they signed with Alliance Abroad, which was apparently 4 times the amount of a normal visa price for a skilled visa for a chef. Can you go into that a bit?
The contract was worth about $8,500 US, so that's $13,000 Australian or so in today's terms. And they had to sign this contract with Alliance Abroad that effectively gave them the power to garnish that money back out of their wages from Merivale. So Alliance Abroad is not really paying for any of the relocation. They are only paying for a visa and a couple of nights accommodation, and then the rest of it was borne by the chefs, including flights. And so it's very difficult to reconcile how this contract that they had to sign for $13,000 somehow gives them a visa that's really only worth about $3,500, and that's it. And then for the first year of their working in Australia, they have to pay that money back. And these are chefs who are coming in, starting on relatively low wages and struggling to make ends meet. And still, Merivale was not prepared to cover the costs of anything, really. And in fact, Alliance Abroad seems to have made money out of their visas and other accommodation costs.
Okay, and Bianca, can you tell me more about the conditions in the actual venues and their kitchens and what a kind of day in the life would be for some of these workers?
So it was a very, very high pressure environment in a lot of these kitchens. There was a lot of shouting, a lot of bullying, a lot of racist remarks. And I think the thing that compounded it all was the incredibly long hours without any paid overtime. So some of the chefs that we spoke to said they were working, regularly over 60 hours a week. Some, up to 68 was probably the longest we'd heard.
Do you ever feel exploited by the company?
Probably in context, yeah, there's some amount of exploitation. Personally, I'm happy here. I'm glad I'm here. What my biggest complaint is if they would have told me, hey, we're going to treat you like shit, we're going to give you shit, but in 5-6 years, you're going to become a citizen of this beautiful country. Yeah. Fuck it, I'll take it. Talk to me like a man, talk to me like a human, talk to me straightforward. Cool, I'm having it. I'm down to clown. But the way they delivered this, it was not like that. It's just fucking smoke screens and falsehood and make believe. And
one woman described, working at Mr. Wong's. A usual day would be getting there at 10:30 in the morning, working until about 5, breaking for an hour or two, and then going back to work until 2 a.m. And she talked about how they would be so exhausted in between these shifts that you would go into the Mr. Wong's break room and people would just be sleeping there side by side, desperately trying to get some shut-eye.
And this is one of, Sydney's most prestigious and well-known restaurants. And I think diners would be shocked to know what's going on behind the scenes there, that these chefs felt so poorly treated. They had just come from an area in which their lives were at risk through cartel violence. And to be put in those conditions for a company that spends 2 times as much as any other company on fit-outs only to treat its staff so poorly.
And that's not to mention the staff that we spoke to that had to continue working through injury. One person said they could barely walk, but they were called to come in and sort of stand behind a barbecue for a full shift. Another person had a broken bone and was just expected to keep working as normal. And these are people that had medical certificates and they were just told, well, you seem fine, might as well keep on with it.
Yeah, it is quite horrific to imagine. And yes, you definitely wouldn't imagine that taking place at a lavish venue in Sydney on a Friday night. You wouldn't even fathom that was going on. But there was a turning point in 2019 when hundreds of staff filed a class action lawsuit against Merivale, which the company agreed to settle last year for $19 million without admitting fault. But many migrant workers actually declined to sign on to that lawsuit. Why was that, Eryk?
They're in fear. They're worried that their visas would be put at risk if they signed up to a class action lawsuit that would give them access to restitution for money that they are owed. At the end of the day, Merivale has this power over staff because it has power over their visas, and it knows this. And it employs people in these conditions precisely for that reason. A worker who is reliant on a visa to stay in Australia is very unlikely to complain. And the end result are dozens, if not hundreds, of deeply unhappy workers who are toiling away just in the hope that they can make it through to finally not just have their sponsorship, but eventually permanent residency so that they can leave Merivale.
And I did want to ask about this because you have those racing towards this so-called golden ticket of permanent residency. It kind of resulted in quite a unique working environment. Can you tell me more about that, Bianca?
Yeah, so in Merivale, it was the chefs that managed to be promoted to the position of sous chef or head chef that ended up getting permanent residency. And there's only a limited number of those positions available. So that ends up creating a very competitive environment. One chef described it as an absolute dogfight. So, they would all sort of be clamoring for this position of dominance over each other, shouting, bullying each other. It was sort of like a dog-eat-dog situation.
And it's this disparity which you both point out between the wealth of this multi-billion-dollar empire and the alleged crumbs it's paying its workers. So what do you make of that? Can you tell me more about this empire?
I think it's scale and greed. At the end of the day, companies that are worth billions of dollars only get there through squeezing every penny. And that comes at the cost of people. I think Merivale would say that it does also host, generous staff parties. It has giveaways. It has all these fabulous events that are designed to boost morale. But at the end of the day, the actual pay packets of people, are so tight that they're struggling to get by. And if they are getting by, some of them are earning just over the national hourly minimum wage while working double the national average hours. So, for example, if you're on a contract that's worth just over the award of $78,000 a year, the key distinction is that those overtime rates only apply if you work a 6th or 7th day in a row. So what the company does is squeeze as many hours as humanly possible into 5 days. And you have chefs working 14-hour shifts. The cumulative result of all of that is that you have chefs working 68 hours sometimes and basically earning just over $25 an hour. The company is run by Justin Hemmies. He's on the Australian Financial Review's rich list. He has a mansion that might well be the most expensive home in Australia, the Hermitage, worth, analysts say, almost $200 million now. He has created this empire out of Merivale, which started decades ago as a department store, and transformed it into a hospitality empire. Despite his personal wealth, his company has implemented policies that we now know, because of internal documents, show that Merivale is still squeezing its workers by implementing strategies to make sure that the maximum amount of hours worked are squeezed into those 5 days.
Yeah, and it does have a big impact on them. There were the chefs from Hotel Paddington that spoke to us about, working 16-hour shifts and being so exhausted, they would just sit on these milk crates afterwards and stare at each other silently, downing jug after jug of beer, just to go home, sleep for 4 hours, come back and do it all again. They said they developed massive drinking and drug abuse problems during those periods.
And so what did happen to some of those people you spoke to? Did they leave the company? Are they okay now?
Well, most of the people I spoke with have since left the company. Some of them left pretty early on and found other people to sponsor them. Some returned home to Mexico. And others stuck it out for the full 4 years, gained permanent residency with Merivale, and then usually left within the year. In all of the cases, though, they're a lot happier now. Every other workplace they've been since, they say it's just night and day.
As one of the chefs said, it sounded like a dream, but it turned out to be a nightmare. And I think that's really, typifies the experience of so many of these chefs that have worked in Merivale kitchens. But Bianca's also found out new information about the next plans for Alliance Abroad.
Yes. So Alliance Abroad contacted the candidates from the 2017-2018 recruitment drive and asked them for their testimonies so that they can use them to recruit more chefs from Mexico for Merivale. I'm presuming later this year or maybe next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, just on that note, the entire hospitality industry in Australia, it seems, is facing a reckoning at the moment, not just in Sydney, not just at Merivale. You've reported on Swill House. We've seen, for instance, earlier this month, the violent outburst of a top chef in Melbourne. So where is all the accountability in all of this? Are we seeing any changes since your first reports last year?
Well, I think the companies would say that they've implemented, new safety protocols. Swill House, which once had one part-time HR advisor for a company of 500 employees, now has someone who is full-time. They have put in other, measures to make sure that staff are aware of their responsibilities and that managers are on the lookout for any sort of unsafe behaviour. The company's responses has very much always been reactive. It's only once the allegations are published that companies go, oh boy, we might have a problem here. And then they implement measures. And that is a good result, that they are actually taking steps, and that staff working within those venues might turn around and go, oh, actually, maybe that isn't okay. And they're more aware of some of the situations that they're putting themselves in. The government's actively investigating. Safe Work New South Wales is still investigating both Merivale and Swill House. We've heard from the New South Wales Upper House inquiries into licensing and potential licensing breaches for those companies. It's basically a multi-pronged approach.
Well, Eryk and Bianca, this is, of course, just one part of your investigation out this week. You've also covered the Hemi's property empire and notable VIPs at Merivale venues, including high-profile politicians and even criminals. And listeners can find those stories on our website. So thank you again both for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia.
Merivale responded to questions from our mastheads after recording this podcast. Lawyers for Merivale have denied all of the allegations against it. They denied the company targeted migrant workers, stating the allegation was baseless and offensive. Lawyers acting for Merivale also denied allegations of racial discrimination, said the company vigorously denied underpaying its staff, and maintained the claims were false. Merivale said employees, quote, receive the pay that meets or exceeds the relevant award entitlements. Lawyers for Merivale also refuted claims of uncleanliness, noting Merivale venues are subjected to regular inspections and contracted professional cleaning services.